Hello, my fellow guitar nuts. Today I wanted to give you a quick and easy way to think about chord substitution. But first, what is chord substitution? It's just a fancy way of saying we're going to swap out one of the chords in our progression for something that has a different color, a different vibe to it. So, for example, we will take a 1-4-5 progression today in the key of G, which is going to give us a G major, a C major, and a D major. So how about this? We'll begin by swapping out our second chord, so chord 4, the C major. First, we have to think about what notes are involved in that chord. So thinking about a triad, I always say the easiest way to think about a triad is every other note alphabetically. So C, not D, but E, not F, but G. So C, E, G gives us our basic chord. And what we want to do is think about something that resembles this very closely. So if we just change one note, for instance, let's say let's do this. We'll keep the C and the E, but we're going to change out that G for an A. Well, now we've got a different triad altogether, which gives us an A minor. So listen to how that changes the vibe, the mood of the progression, just by changing the one chord. So I'll play it one side through with the 1-4-5, and then I'm going to change it the second time through. So just a little bit of a different vibe there. It can make for a good shift in a pre-chorus or a chorus or a bridge type of thing. It's a subtle transition, but if you want to get something more dramatic, all you need to do is change more notes in the chord. So here's an example of something that's a little bit more colorful, but still using the same concept of keeping some common tones, but adding a couple that didn't exist in the first round of the progression. So the way that I got there is to, again, keep some common tones. So in that case, I kept the C and the E, and then I added a B on top of that, giving me a ninth. So it was an A minor 11th sound, which actually got a D in there as well. So the notes A, C, D, and B, and that resolves really nicely to the last chord in the progression, which was just a D major. So here's some quick and easy substitutions that you can try throwing into your progressions. Anytime you want to change the 1, try subbing it out for a 3 or a 6. Why 3 or 6? Because if we look at G major, we would have G, B, and D. But let's look for a second at 3. We would have a B, a D, and an F sharp. So really only one note different than what we started with. How about the 6th? So we start with G, B, D on our 1, and then we have E, G, B for our 6. So again, one note difference. It's going to sound pretty smooth. Now, another way we can get there is swapping out 2 for 4 and even 7 for 5. So one of my favorite ways of getting really cool chord substitutions is through a method called modal interchange. Now this may sound kind of crazy right off the bat, but really it's as simple as just borrowing chords from the scale that may share the root that you're using. So for example, if we were thinking about C major, but we're suddenly shifting to a C minor mentality and taking one of those chords only for a moment, maybe a bar, and then coming right back to C major, we didn't totally shift keys, we just borrowed it right out of that key, bringing it back. A really good example of this is in the old Santo and Johnny classic Sleepwalk. So that is built off a very standard progression of a 1-6-4-5, sounds like this. But they change it by borrowing the 4 from the C minor key every once in a while. So it'll sound like this. Really cool substitution, adds a lot of emotion to the song. So the way that you can get there, again, is by thinking about the parallel key, and that term may confuse you, and if it does, just throw it out the window for now. So a great way to visualize this stuff is by using the circle of fifths. If you've never heard about the circle of fifths, you should definitely check that out. I did a previous video on it. You can link to that here. If you take a look at the circle of fifths, you will see C major at the top of the circle at the 12 o'clock position, no sharps, no flats. The way we need to think is by finding the C minor version of that. And we're going to look on the scale. We're going to find that it shares the same key signature as E flat. And the fourth chord in that key is going to be F minor. Again, if you're not familiar with the circle of fifths, I highly encourage you to check out that video that I did, because it's going to explain how exactly you find what's available to you within a key. And once you understand that stuff, you'll have a lot more options for your songwriting, progressions, things to take to jam sessions and that sort. Another really cool method for chord substitution is something called tritone substitution, very common in jazz music. And all we're doing there is subbing out the 5 chord for the flat 2 chord. So in the key of C, popular jazz progression, perhaps the most popular jazz progression of all time, is a 2-5-1. So normally it would be D minor, a G7 of some kind, and then a C major of some kind. So if we swap out that 5 for a flat 2 chord, that would give us a D flat 7. So it would sound like this in context. So this works because you're getting a similar tension and resolution. So let's look at the 5 chord for a second. So if we look at this G7 as a shell, I'm going to play the root, the flat 7, and the 3rd. We want to hear this note go up a half step for resolution. And we also want to hear this go downward. So that's the flat 7 going to the 3rd of the 1. And this one over here, the 3rd of the 5 chord, wants to go to the root of the 1 chord. So altogether, a good resolution would sound like this. Sounds pretty. So what's happening here in our tritone sub is that we're getting the same from the 3rd, or actually it was the 3rd of our 5 chord, and now it's the flat 7 of this substitution. Is still going to have that half step movement that's so important in the tension and resolution. So we actually have 2 notes in there that are going to go upwards a half step to have a nice, beautiful resolution. That would be the 9 of this chord that I'm using now, and the flat 7. So in context, it might sound something like this. So that might sound a little strange to your ears if you've never heard it, but give it some time. I think you might get used to it and even like that it adds some tension, but it's not enough to peel the paint off the walls or anything, I hope. Stick with it. You might find that you like it. You know, if you play music all the time that just is in the pocket, it might get a little boring, and that's where chord substitution is really a powerful tool. When you want to change it up just for a second to throw the listener's ears or create a new vibe, that's where you're going to get the most out of this stuff. So to recap, some quick and easy methods for finding chord substitutions. We can do diatonic chord substitution. Oh my God, that sounds crazy. No, it just means that we're going to take it all from the same key that we started in. And again, to review that, we had the 1 being subbed by the 3 and the 6. The 4 can be subbed by the 2, and the 5 can be subbed by the 7. Are these the only ways of doing things? No. Remember that you can add extensions to these substitutions. Sometimes just adding an extension to the existing chord progression is enough to give you that new vibe you may be looking for. We also looked at modal interchange. Modal interchange is just the fancy way of saying we're going to borrow it from a different key for a moment. A really common way of doing that is to borrow from the parallel minor key. So if you started in a major progression, you could borrow the 4, shaking things up just a little bit. And the last method we used was the tritone sub, subbing out the 5 with a flat 2-7 chord. Why do I say 7? Because I was using a dominant 7th in that scenario. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully this gives you some new ideas to take to your chord progressions, shake things up a little bit, try some things that you didn't know about before. If you need some more help, you know where to find me. Hit me up in the comments below. Be sure and subscribe because I got a lot more stuff coming your way. I can't wait to bring it to you. I can't wait to see you back here next week. Thanks for being here.